A slap echoed through New York's most elegant ballroom, silencing 200 guests in a heartbeat. Lucy Monroe had just slapped the city's most desired billionaire, in front of cameras, flashing lights, and shocked stares. But what no one expected was what Parker Whitmore did next. He pulled her in by the waist and kissed her. A kiss that didn't ask for permission. A kiss that would change everything. Because sometimes, the scandal is just the beginning of something the heart already knew. But the mind was still resisting. If you're curious to see how this story unfolds, subscribe to the channel. Leave your like and comment where you're listening from. I love knowing I'm not alone on this journey. You know that feeling of living on autopilot? Looking at your life and feeling like something important got left behind. I've felt that too. And I discovered that sometimes we need a push, the kind that wakes up what's been sleeping inside us. I've pinned something in the comments that might resonate with you today. It's not for everyone. Only for those who still believe there's a version of themselves waiting to be reborn. The Plaza Hotel ballroom had never looked so grand. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like captured constellations, casting golden light over haute couture gowns and impeccable tuxedos. It was the night of the year's most anticipated charity gala, the kind of event where fortunes were displayed disguised as charity and where every smile hid a negotiation. Lucy Monroe adjusted the thin strap of her black dress as she watched the scene from afar, her fingers tight around the champagne flute she'd barely touched. She didn't belong in this world. Not really. As an investigative journalist, she'd spent years exposing exactly the type of people now smiling around her. But her editor had insisted, "You need visibility, Lucy. Show up. Be seen." So there she was. Visible, uncomfortable, and dangerously aware of the gaze that had been following her since she'd entered the ballroom. Parker Whitmore. She knew him only by reputation. Billionaire, philanthropist when convenient, charming in a way magazines loved to call lethal. Dark hair combed back, chiseled jaw, eyes that seemed to read secrets you didn't even know you were keeping. He was surrounded by a small group of admirers, but his eyes never left Lucy. Not for a second. She turned away, pretending interest in a nearby modern sculpture. But when she felt his presence behind her, the woody cologne mixed with something citrus, the closeness that stole the air, she knew ignoring him wouldn't be an option. Lucy Monroe. His voice was deep, controlled. Finally. She turned slowly, lifting her chin. Finally seeing you in person. Parker smiled sideways like someone holding an amusing secret. I've read all your articles. You have a very incisive way of revealing inconvenient truths. And you have a convenient way of avoiding them, she replied, not breaking eye contact. His smile widened. Touché. There was a tense silence, punctuated only by the distant murmur of conversations and the soft sound of a string quartet. Lucy felt the weight of his gaze. Not just admiration, but something deeper, like recognition. Can I get you a better drink than that? Parker pointed to the untouched glass in her hand. Or a more interesting conversation than the one you're avoiding. I'm not avoiding anything. You are, and quite well, I should add. He stepped forward, closing the distance between them even more. But I promise to be less boring than the rest of this evening. Lucy should have declined. Should have smiled politely and walked away. But there was something in the way he looked at her. As if he already knew her. As if he'd been waiting for this moment for a long time. That made her hesitate. A conversation, she finally said. That's all. They walked to one of the side balconies, away from the spotlights and curious stares. The October night breeze carried the scent of dry leaves in the city that never sleeps. Lucy crossed her arms, more for protection than from cold. So, she began, what does a billionaire want to talk about with a journalist who spends her life unmasking billionaires? Parker leaned against the railing, his gaze fixed on Manhattan's illuminated horizon. Maybe I want to be unmasked. Everyone has secrets, Mr. Whitmore, but not everyone wants them revealed. Parker, he corrected, turning to face her. And you're right, but some secrets are worth being discovered by the right person. There was something dangerous about this conversation, something Lucy couldn't name but felt in the way her heart raced, how her hands were slightly sweating. Do you always speak in riddles? Only when I'm nervous. She almost laughed. Men like you don't get nervous. Men like me rarely meet women like you. He took a step forward and Lucy felt her back touch the cold stone wall. Women who see beyond the facade, who aren't impressed by fortunes or last names. You don't know me, Lucy whispered, but her voice came out less firm than intended. Not yet. His eyes dropped to her lips, then back up. But I'd very much like to. That's when everything fell apart. A female voice, loud and shrill, cut through the air. Parker, there you are. A stunning blonde woman in a red dress appeared on the balcony accompanied by two men in tuxedos. She looked from Parker to Lucy, and her smile transformed into something sharp. Interrupting something. Important? The word was spat with contempt. Parker stepped back, his jaw tense. Vanessa, not the time. Oh, of course. Vanessa laughed, a humorless sound. It's never the time when you're entertained. Lucy felt her blood boil. There was something in the way this woman looked at her, as if she were invisible, insignificant, as if she were just another one. Sorry, Lucy said, her voice cutting. I didn't know I was interrupting a private meeting. You're not interrupting anything, Parker began, but Vanessa interrupted him. Oh, sweetheart. She moved closer, expensive perfume mixing with malice. Parker has a special way of making every girl feel unique. But don't fool yourself. For men like him, women like you are just... Lucy didn't hear the rest. Her hand moved before her brain processed the decision. The slap echoed across the balcony, then through the ballroom, silencing conversations, interrupting laughter, freezing time. Vanessa brought her hand to her face, shocked. The two men stepped forward, but Parker stopped them with a gesture. You don't speak for me, Lucy said, her voice trembling with contained anger. And you, she looked at Parker, don't insult me by pretending I'm different when I clearly am not. She turned to leave, but his hand closed around her wrist. Lucy, let me go. No. And then, in front of Vanessa, the two men and the dozens of guests now crowding the balcony doors, Parker pulled Lucy to him and kissed her. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was urgent, desperate, as if he were trying to say everything he hadn't had time to explain. His free hand found the nape of her neck, fingers tangling in her dark hair, while the other held her waist firmly. For a second, just one, Lucy allowed herself to feel. The heat, the intensity, the way the world disappeared when his lips met hers. But then reality returned. The cameras, the flashes, the whispers that were turning into headlines. She pushed him away, breathless, her eyes burning with anger and confusion. What did you do? She whispered. Parker stared at her, his chest rising and falling rapidly. What I should have done from the beginning. And as Lucy fled the ballroom with the echo of flashes and whispers chasing her, a single certainty pulsed in her mind. Nothing would ever be the same again. Lucy didn't sleep that night. Sitting on the worn sofa in her Brooklyn apartment, she watched her phone buzz incessantly on the coffee table. Notifications exploded on the screen like fireworks. Messages, emails, missed calls. Her editor, fellow journalists, unknown numbers, and, of course, the headlines. Journalist assaults billionaire at charity gala. Controversial kiss goes viral. Parker Whitmore and romantic scandal. Who is the mysterious Lucy Monroe? Love or publicity? The kiss that stopped New York. She tossed the phone onto the sofa and pressed her palms against her eyes. How had everything spiraled so completely out of control? One moment she was defending her dignity. The next, she was trending alongside a man she barely knew. The doorbell rang at 7 in the morning. Lucy opened the door still in her robe, hair thrown up in a messy bun, expecting to find a delivery person or maybe her nosy neighbor. Instead, she found herself face to face with Parker Whitmore, impeccable in a charcoal suit, holding 2 coffee cups and a paper bag that smelled like fresh bread. Good morning, he said, as if showing up at her door at 7 in the morning was the most natural thing in the world. You're kidding. Lucy didn't move from the threshold. How did you find my address? I have resources. He held up one of the cups. And coffee. Can I come in? No. Lucy. He sighed, and for the first time she saw something beyond unwavering confidence. Exhaustion, maybe even regret. We need to talk, please. She hesitated, every instinct screaming to close the door. But there was something in his eyes, a raw sincerity she hadn't expected to find, that made her step aside. 5 minutes, she said. Parker entered the small apartment, and Lucy noticed how out of place he seemed there. Everything about him screamed luxury, the perfect cut of his suit, the watch that probably cost more than 6 months of her rent, even the way he moved, with the confidence of someone who'd always had space. Her apartment, on the other hand, was cozy but modest. Shelves full of books, a dining table that also served as a desk, plants trying to survive in the limited window light. Coffee? He extended one of the cups. Lucy accepted more out of necessity than courtesy. The first sip revealed that he'd been paying attention. Black coffee, no sugar, exactly how she'd had it the night before. "You remember?" she said, almost an accusation. "I pay attention," he replied, setting the bread bag on the table. "Especially when it comes to you. Don't do that." "What?" "Pretend you know me. Pretend yesterday was anything more than what it really was. A public disaster." Parker moved closer but maintained a respectful distance. "It was a disaster, I won't deny it. But it wasn't pretend, Lucy. Nothing I said or did yesterday was a lie." "Then why that kiss?" The words came out harsher than she intended. "To prove some point? To get back at Vanessa? To use me as a piece in your ego game? To protect you?" Lucy blinked, disarmed by the simplicity of the answer. "Vanessa was going to destroy you in that ballroom," Parker continued, his voice low but firm. "She has a sharp tongue and enough influence to turn your career to ashes before breakfast. If I hadn't done anything, you'd be labeled as the opportunistic journalist who attacked a billionaire for attention. But with the kiss..." He paused. "With the kiss, the narrative changes. Now we're a controversial love story. Controversial, yes, but not destructive for you." Lucy stared at him, processing. "You planned this?" "I didn't plan to kiss you, no." His eyes met hers. "But when the opportunity came, I took it and I don't regret it." She should have been furious, should have thrown him out. But there was a twisted, almost irritatingly clever logic in what he'd said. "And now?" Lucy crossed her arms. "Are we going to pretend it was a misunderstanding? That the kiss meant nothing?" "No." Parker took a deep breath like someone about to jump off a cliff. "Now I'm proposing an agreement." "An agreement?" She laughed without humor. "Of course. Because that's how you people solve everything, right? With contracts and clauses. Hear me out before you judge." He pulled out a chair and sat down, inviting her to do the same. Lucy remained standing out of pure pride, but he continued. "The media won't leave us alone, you know that. They'll speculate, make things up, twist every word. Your career will suffer. My reputation too." "Your reputation?" Lucy raised an eyebrow. "You're Parker Whitmore, billionaire, philanthropist. Manhattan's most desired man, according to the last magazine I read. A romantic scandal will only add to your charm. Maybe. But my family doesn't think so." He rubbed his temple, a tired gesture. "My mother is threatening to remove me from certain business operations if I don't stabilize my image. And my cousin Ethan is waiting for any slip-up to take control of the company." Lucy finally sat down, intrigued despite herself. "And where do I fit into this?" "Pretend to be my fiancé." The words fell between them like a bomb. "You've lost your mind," Lucy said slowly. "For 6 months." Parker leaned forward, his eyes fixed on hers. "We appear together at events, post occasional photos, convince my family we're real. In the end, we break up amicably, each goes their own way. And we both come out better than we went in. And how exactly do I come out better from a public lie?" "Your career," he said simply. "With my last name beside you, even if temporary, you'll have access to sources you never had. Doors will open. Exclusive interviews, restricted events, privileged information. You can write the stories you always wanted but never could because you didn't have the right access pass." Lucy bit her lower lip, hating how much sense that made. "And what do you get besides calming your mother down?" "Time," Parker replied. "Time to prove to Ethan and the board that I'm stable, focused, ready to lead without distractions, and he hesitated. Maybe the chance to really get to know you, without cameras, without Vanessa, without misunderstandings. There was something in the way he said that last part, vulnerable, almost shy, that made Lucy's heart race. This is ridiculous. It's practical. It's a lie. It's a strategy. He extended his hand across the table. 6 months, Lucy. A clear contract. No real romantic involvement. Just a convincing performance. In the end, you'll have the career you deserve and I'll have the peace I need. Lucy looked at the outstretched hand, then at his face. There were so many reasons to refuse. But there was also a stubborn voice at the back of her mind. The same one that had led her to confront powerful men, to expose uncomfortable truths, to never accept the easy path, whispering, "What if? No romantic involvement," she repeated, as if she needed to hear it out loud. "None," he confirmed. 6 months. And then it's over. Completely. She took his hand. The grip was firm, professional, but they both felt the electric current that ran through the touch. "You have a deal, Mr. Whitmore." "Parker," he corrected, smiling for the first time since he'd arrived. "Parker," she repeated, already wondering if she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life. Outside, Brooklyn awakened under the weak October sun, indifferent to the fact that 2 lives had just become intertwined in a lie that perhaps hid something dangerously close to the truth. Parker's penthouse occupied the top floor of an Art Deco building in Midtown, with floor-to-ceiling windows that framed Central Park like a living painting. Lucy stopped at the entrance, the suitcase heavy in her hand, and tried not to let her amazement show. "It's spacious," she said, knowing the word didn't do the place justice. Parker emerged from the hallway, barefoot and in shirt sleeves, the first time she'd seen him without the formal armor of a complete suit. Something about that informality made him more human, more dangerous too, in a way Lucy wasn't prepared to admit. "Your room is in this wing." He pointed to the left. "It has a private bathroom, closet, park view. If you need anything, just let me know." "And you?" "Opposite wing." He smiled slightly. "Safe distance, as promised?" Lucy nodded, ignoring the relief mixed with something she couldn't name. Disappointment, perhaps? Ridiculous. The first few days were a strange dance of polite avoidance. They crossed paths in the kitchen in the morning, exchanged cordial greetings, shared the space like 2 strangers forced to coexist. Parker worked in the makeshift office in the dining room, surrounded by screens and papers. Lucy rode on the balcony, her laptop warming her legs while autumn painted the park gold and red. But living together, however carefully, began to create cracks in the agreement. It was on the 3rd morning that Lucy came down to the kitchen and found fresh coffee waiting, next to a note. "I know you're not a morning person. Thought this might help. P." It was on the 5th night that Parker came home late from a meeting and found dinner stored in the fridge with a post-it stuck to the container. "Leftover lasagna. Heat for 3 minutes. Don't let it burn. L." Small gestures. Insignificant, almost. But each one planted a seed of familiarity that neither had intended to cultivate. A week after the move, Lucy woke up in the middle of the night, thirsty. The penthouse was silent, bathed only in the light of the city that never sleeps. She walked barefoot to the kitchen, the marble floor cold under her feet, and almost dropped the glass when she saw the silhouette by the window. Parker was standing in front of the glass, hands in the pockets of his sweatpants, gaze lost in the night view. He wore only a white t-shirt, and Lucy noticed, not for the first time but with more intensity now, the way the fabric fit his broad shoulders, the upright posture even in relaxation. "Sorry," she said softly. "I didn't know you were awake." He turned, and the dim city light illuminated the exhaustion on his face. "I don't sleep very well. Insomnia?" "Something like that." He gestured to the empty glass in her hand. "Water?" "Yes." Parker grabbed a bottle from the fridge and filled the glass for her, his fingers brushing hers for a fraction of a second in the exchange. Lucy felt the touch reverberate more than it should. "You don't sleep either?" he asked, leaning against the counter. "I usually sleep well, but here," she paused. "It's different." "Different how?" "Too quiet. Too organized." Lucy smiled slightly. My apartment has traffic noise, neighbors arguing, a dog barking at 3 in the morning. Here it's almost unreal. Parker laughed softly, a genuine sound she hadn't heard yet. I can hire someone to yell in the hallway if that helps. Very kind of you. They stood there, paused in the dimness of the kitchen, and the silence that settled wasn't uncomfortable. It was different. It was the kind of silence that only exists between people who are beginning to feel safe with each other. Can I ask you a question? Lucy finally asked. Of course. Why did you really propose this agreement? She looked at him. And don't tell me it was just about your mother or Ethan. There's something more, isn't there? Parker looked away, his fingers drumming on the counter. For a long moment, Lucy thought he wouldn't answer. You remind me why I started all this, he finally said, his voice low. The business, the empire, the public image. I got lost somewhere along the way. I became the Parker Whitmore of the headlines, the gala dinners, the rehearsed speeches. And when I saw you that night, he met her gaze again. I saw someone who still knows who they are, who didn't sell out, who fights for what they believe in even when it's hard. Lucy felt something tighten in her chest. You're idealizing me. Maybe. But I don't think I'm wrong. I got lost too, Parker. The words came out before she could stop them. I had a scandal 2 years ago. A story I believed was true but had a fake source. It almost destroyed my career. Since then I've been trying to rebuild, but she swallowed hard. Sometimes I feel like I'm just pretending to be the brave journalist I once was. And that's why you accepted my agreement. It wasn't a question. But Lucy nodded anyway. Parker took a step forward, closing the distance between them. The city light drew shadows on his face, softening the angles, revealing something more vulnerable. Then maybe, he said slowly, we can help each other find the way back. Lucy should have stepped back, should have remembered the contract, the rules, the clear line they'd drawn between performance and reality. But she was tired of running, tired of pretending she didn't feel the electric current whenever he entered the room, tired of ignoring the way her heart raced when their eyes met. This is dangerous, she whispered. I know. The agreement hasn't changed. Parker raised his hand, hesitant, and brushed away a strand of hair that had fallen over her face. The touch was light, almost reverent, but maybe we don't need to pretend as much as we thought. Lucy closed her eyes for a second, feeling the tips of his fingers brush her temple, her jaw leaving a trail of heat. When she opened her eyes again, he was still there, so close she could count every strand of stubble, every shade of gray in his dark eyes. Good night, Lucy, he finally said, stepping back before either of them could do something irreversible. Good night, Parker. She returned to her room with her heart beating erratically, knowing that something fundamental had changed in that silent kitchen. The rules still existed on paper, but in reality, in that penthouse suspended above the city, in that space between what was agreed upon and what was felt, the lines were beginning to blur. And the scariest part wasn't that it was happening. It was that neither of them seemed willing to stop it. The Whitmore estate in the Hamptons wasn't just a house. It was a statement. Wrought iron gates opened onto a driveway lined with centuries-old oak trees, leading to a stone mansion that looked more like a European castle transplanted to Long Island. Lucy clutched her purse strap in her lap as Parker's car drove through the entrance, trying not to let her anxiety show. Breathe, Parker said from the driver's seat, glancing at her sideways. She doesn't bite. Mothers like yours don't need to bite. They destroy with a look. He laughed, but didn't deny it. Margaret Whitmore waited for them at the top of the marble staircase, an elegant figure in a beige linen suit, her gray hair pulled into an impeccable bun. Everything about her screamed old class, money that doesn't need to announce itself, power that requires no validation. Parker. She extended her hand to her son, who politely kissed her cheek. Then her eyes, blue as ice, analytical as a scalpel, landed on Lucy. And you must be the famous Lucy Monroe. Mrs. Whitmore. Lucy extended her hand, which was accepted with a firm, brief shake. It's a pleasure to meet you. The pleasure is all mine. Finally. The tone was cordial, but there was a layer of judgment in the words that Lucy felt to her bones. Parker has been so reserved about you two. We wanted to keep things private, Parker interjected, placing his hand on Lucy's back. A protective gesture she silently appreciated. Private. Margaret repeated the word like someone tasting a suspicious wine. How modern. Come in, come in. Lunch will be served shortly, and I'm sure you want to freshen up. The interior of the mansion was as intimidating as the exterior. High ceilings, crystal chandeliers, portraits of Whitmore ancestors watching from gilded frames. Lucy felt the weight of generations of expectations pressing on her shoulders as they followed Margaret down the hallway. I've set aside adjacent rooms for you, Margaret said, stopping in front of 2 oak doors. I hope they'll be comfortable. Actually, Mother, Parker began, Lucy and I can share. Nonsense. Margaret cut in with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. You're not married yet, dear, and while you're under my roof, we'll follow certain traditions. Lucy felt the tension in Parker's shoulders, but he only nodded. Of course. When Margaret walked away, Parker turned to Lucy. Sorry, I should have warned you she's traditional. I noticed. Lucy looked at her own room's door. 2 weeks like this are going to be interesting. We'll survive. He briefly touched her face, a gesture that was already beginning to feel natural between them. Together. Lunch was a carefully orchestrated display of formalities. The dining table could easily seat 12, but only 4 occupied it. Margaret at the head, Parker and Lucy on one side, and on the other, Ethan Whitmore. Lucy recognized him immediately from photos in business magazines. Parker's cousin, a few years older, handsome in a polished and calculated way. He smiled when they were introduced, but the smile didn't reach his brown eyes. Lucy Monroe, Ethan said, raising his wine glass. The journalist who conquered the Whitmore heir's heart. Fascinating. Ethan, Parker warned, his voice low. What? I'm just being friendly. Ethan leaned back in his chair, his gaze assessing Lucy like someone examining a chess piece. It must be interesting, Lucy. Going from writing about powerful people to, well, being involved with one. I don't see how one thing excludes the other, Lucy replied, keeping her tone polite but firm. My work is still my work. Of course, of course. Ethan took a sip of wine. Though it's curious how things happened so quickly. A public kiss, a lightning engagement. Almost seems like a movie script. Ethan, Margaret intervened, her voice sharp as glass. Behavior. I'm just making conversation, Aunt. But he smiled at Lucy in a way that made it clear this was only the beginning. That evening, after an equally tense dinner, Lucy finally managed to escape to her room. She was changing clothes when soft knocks sounded at the door. It's me, Parker's voice came from the hallway. Lucy opened the door to find him leaning against the frame, shirt sleeves rolled up, hair slightly tousled. Survived the first day? He asked. Barely. She stepped aside, letting him in. Your mother hates me and your cousin is clearly trying to prove we're a fraud. They don't hate you. Parker closed the door behind him. They just test. It's what the Whitmores do. They test to see if you're strong enough to stay. And if I'm not? He stepped forward, taking her hands. You are. I saw you face Vanessa, saw you confront me when no one else would. You're stronger than anyone in this house, Lucy, including me. Lucy felt something melt in her chest. You're being tested too, you realize. Your mother wants to see if you'll defend me. Ethan wants to see if you'll falter. Then let's prove them wrong. Parker intertwined his fingers with hers. Together. Like we agreed. Together, Lucy repeated. And for the first time since they'd arrived, she felt like maybe they could get through this. In the following days, life on the estate became a constant performance. Morning walks through the gardens, where Margaret watched them from the window. Formal dinners where every word was weighed, every look analyzed. Stolen moments in the library, where Lucy and Parker hid among shelves of old books, laughing quietly at sarcastic comments about his family. It was during one of those moments, Lucy sitting on the floor between shelves, Parker beside her leafing through a poetry book, that she realized they weren't pretending anymore. The smiles were genuine. The touches, natural. The way he instinctively reached for her hand, how she leaned into him when tired, how they both communicated with just a look. None of it was performance. It was real, and that should have scared her. Should have made her pull back, remember the rules. The contract with an expiration date. But when Parker looked up from the book and smiled, that small, intimate smile reserved only for her, Lucy didn't feel fear. She felt something dangerously close to belonging. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "That maybe your family isn't the biggest test we're going to face." "No?" Lucy held his gaze. "No. We are." Parker closed the book slowly, his attention fully on her now. "Lucy." But before he could finish, the library door opened. Ethan stood there with an expression Lucy couldn't decipher. "Margaret wants you both in the living room," he said. "Now." And from the way he looked at them, with that small, victorious smile, Lucy knew something was about to change. The Whitmore main living room was a sanctuary of antiques and family history. Margaret occupied the burgundy leather armchair like a queen on her throne, hands elegantly crossed on her lap. Ethan stood beside the fireplace, the smile still playing on his lips. And there, sitting on the opposite sofa, was a man Lucy had never seen. Gray hair, thin-framed glasses, a leather briefcase on his knees. "Sit down." Margaret gestured to the empty sofa. Parker guided Lucy there, his hand firm on her back. Protection or warning, she couldn't tell. They sat side by side, close enough that their knees touched. "This is Mr. Bradshaw," Margaret announced. "The family's private investigator for over 20 years, very reliable." Lucy felt her blood run cold. Beside her, Parker went still, only his jaw tensing. "Mother?" he said, his voice dangerously calm. "What's going on?" "Just doing the necessary due diligence, dear." Margaret smiled, but there was no warmth there. When a Whitmore announces an engagement, especially so, suddenly it's natural for the family to want to ensure all the facts are clear. "Facts?" Lucy repeated, meeting Margaret's icy gaze. "You're investigating us?" "I'm protecting my family's assets and reputation," Margaret replied without hesitation. "Surely you, as a journalist, understand the importance of verifying sources." Ethan let out a short laugh. "Aunt Margaret just wants to make sure your love is genuine. There's nothing wrong with that. There's everything wrong with that." Parker stood, fury contained in every movement. "You have no right." "I have every right." Margaret also stood, and something in the way mother and son faced each other reminded Lucy of two generals before battle. "You are the heir to this family, Parker. Every decision you make affects not just you, but generations of Whitmores. I'm not going to stand by while you potentially make a mistake that could cost everything we've built." "Lucy is not a mistake," Parker said, each word punctuated with conviction. Her heart tightened. Was it part of the performance, or was there truth there? "Mr. Bradshaw," Margaret turned to the investigator. "Please, share your findings." The man opened the briefcase, pulling out several documents. "I conducted a complete investigation into the relationship between Parker Whitmore and Lucy Monroe over the past 3 months, since the engagement was publicly announced." Lucy clenched her fists, nails digging into her palms. They'd been careful, but had they been careful enough? And? Ethan leaned forward, clearly eager. Bradshaw adjusted his glasses. "I found substantial evidence that the relationship has existed for significantly longer than was disclosed to the public." Silence. Lucy felt the floor open beneath her feet. How? They'd met at the gala. Everything had started that night. How could there be evidence of something earlier? "Continue," Margaret ordered, but there was something new in her voice. Surprise, perhaps. "There are records of bank transfers from Mr. Whitmore's personal account to Ms. Monroe dating back 8 months. Bradshaw passed documents to Margaret. Small amounts, but regular, monthly. Parker opened his mouth, but no sound came out. "Additionally," Bradshaw continued, "there are surveillance photos of Mr. Whitmore frequenting establishments that Ms. Monroe also frequents. The Strand bookstore, a specific cafe in Brooklyn, even the public library near her residence. Dates that correspond to her visits to the same locations, though at different times." Lucy turned to Parker, her heart racing. "Parker, what is he saying?" But Parker didn't look at her. His eyes were fixed on Bradshaw, an expression Lucy had never seen before, barely disguised panic. "There are also," Bradshaw continued, "records of emails from an anonymous account to Ms. Monroe's editor, recommending her work for certain high-profile stories. The account was traced to a server Mr. Whitmore uses for private communications. Jesus Christ, Ethan murmured, but he seemed more impressed than triumphant now. Margaret took the documents, her eyes scanning each page with surgical precision. When she finally looked up, there was something different in her expression. Not exactly approval, but perhaps reassessment. "Parker," she said, her voice softer, "did you know Lucy before the gala?" He took a deep breath, hands clenched into fists at his sides. "Yes." Lucy felt like she'd been punched. "What?" He finally looked at her and there was pain in his eyes. "Lucy, I can explain." "You knew me?" The words came out louder than she intended. "Before that night? And you never told me? That's not how I wanted you to find out. How was it supposed to be then?" Lucy stood, her body trembling with anger and confusion. "When were you going to tell me? Or was this also part of your plan?" "There was no plan." Parker also stood, taking a step toward her. "I saw you, really met you months before, and since then..." "Since then what?" Lucy felt tears burning but refused to let them fall. "Not here. Not in front of Margaret and Ethan and the damn investigator. Since then I couldn't forget you." The words fell between them like a torn confession. Margaret exchanged a look with Bradshaw, then with Ethan, who looked genuinely surprised for the first time since Lucy had met him. "Well," Margaret finally said, putting the documents back in the briefcase, "this certainly changes things." "Changes?" Lucy looked away from Parker to face her. "What do you mean, changes?" "It means," Margaret approached, her eyes studying Lucy with new intensity, "that perhaps I misjudged the situation. If my son was interested in you for months, watching from afar, quietly supporting your career." She paused. "That's not opportunism. It's devotion. Or obsession," Ethan murmured, but Margaret silenced him with a look. Lucy shook her head, trying to process. "I need air." "Lucy." Parker tried to reach her, but she stepped away. "No, not now." She left the room, hearing Parker call after her, but didn't stop. She crossed the marble hallway, passed through the front door, went down the steps until she reached the gardens. The summer night was stifling, the air thick with the scent of roses and the distant sound of the ocean. Lucy walked until she was far from the house, until the lights became distant dots. Then, finally, she allowed herself to feel anger, confusion, betrayal, but also, and this scared her more than anything else, something dangerously close to hope. "Lucy." Parker's voice came from behind her, softer than she'd ever heard it. She didn't turn around. "How? How what? How did you meet me? When? Why?" He stopped beside her, hands in his pockets, gaze fixed on the dark horizon. "Strand. The bookstore. 8 months ago. You were in the non-fiction section looking for something about investigative journalism. You knocked down 3 books trying to reach one on the top shelf. Despite everything," Lucy almost smiled at the image. "I helped you get it," Parker continued, his voice low. "You thanked me, smiled, that smile that lights something inside me, and went back to reading. I should have left, but I stayed, watching you get lost in those books for almost an hour. Why didn't you talk to me?" "Because I knew." He finally looked at her. "I knew that if I spoke, if I introduced myself as Parker Whitmore, you'd see me like everyone sees me. The billionaire, the last name, the image. And I wanted you to see me as just me." Lucy felt something break inside her. "So you watched me? Followed me?" "Not follow. Never that." He took a deep breath. "But I went back to that bookstore, hoping to see you again. Went to the cafe you frequent, the library. Always from a distance, never invasive. Just wanting to be in the same space as you, even without you knowing I existed. The transfers, anonymous donations, small ones, because I read about your emergency fund for journalistic expenses and thought I could help without you knowing. And the emails to my editor? Recommendations. You're brilliant, Lucy. Your work deserved more attention than it was getting." She closed her eyes, processing everything. It was crazy. It was invasive. It was, "Why didn't you tell me at the gala?" she finally asked. Because you didn't remember me. Parker took a step toward her. That encounter at Strand meant everything to me. But to you? I was just another stranger who helped with books. And when I saw you on that balcony, I thought, this is my second chance. But I couldn't start by saying, hey, you don't remember, but I've been watching you for months. You would have thought I was a complete psychopath. Lucy opened her eyes, meeting his in the darkness. And the agreement? The fake engagement? It was real from the beginning. His voice trembled. For me, it was always real. The silence that followed was charged with everything they could no longer deny. I should be angry, Lucy whispered. Are you? Yes. She took a step toward him. But I'm also… What? She raised her hand, touching his face for the first time with full awareness of what it meant. In love. Maybe I already was. Maybe since that night at the gala. Or maybe since the first morning I woke up in your penthouse and found coffee waiting for me. Parker covered her hand with his, eyes closing briefly. Lucy, this is crazy. I know. It's going to complicate everything. I know. And we'll probably regret it. We won't. He opened his eyes and there was absolute certainty there. Whatever happens between us, I promise. I'll never regret it. Lucy felt the last defenses crumble. There was no more agreement, no more performance. There were just them, under a starry sky in the Hamptons, with the ocean whispering in the distance and the whole world waiting to see what they'd do next. And for the first time, neither of them knew what the next step would be. But they knew, with absolute certainty, that they'd take that step together. The Whitmore dining room had transformed into a stage. Lit candles in silver candlesticks cast dancing shadows over the polished mahogany table, adorned with antique Chinese porcelain and crystal glasses that captured light like prisms. Margaret had orchestrated every detail with military precision, from the floral arrangements to the strategically positioned chairs, ensuring that each guest could observe, judge, and, if necessary, dissect. Lucy adjusted her navy blue dress, borrowed from Margaret's favorite boutique because you need to dress appropriately for the occasion, dear, and tried to control her breathing. Beside her, Parker held her hand under the table, his thumb tracing comforting circles on her skin. Breathe, he murmured so low only she heard. I am breathing. No, you're pretending to breathe. I know the difference. She almost smiled. But then the doors opened and guests began to arrive. First came the Hartford couple, he an oil magnate, she a socialite with a sharp tongue and eyes that missed nothing. Then the Sullivans, owners of a hotel chain that stretched across 3 continents. Next, Senator Morrison, accompanied by her discreet and permanently smiling husband. And lastly, disguised as just another guest, Mr. Bradshaw. Lucy wasn't naive. She knew exactly what this evening represented, the final test. Margaret had gathered the most influential and critical people from her social circle, probably instructing Bradshaw to observe every interaction, every word exchanged, every look shared between her and Parker. An elegantly dressed jury, ready to deliver their verdict. Lucy, dear, Margaret called from across the table, her smile perfectly calibrated. I was telling Senator Morrison about your work. Investigative journalism, isn't it? Yes, ma'am. Lucy met the senator's gaze, a woman in her early 60s, gray hair styled in impeccable waves, posture that commanded respect. I've been focusing mainly on corporate transparency and social responsibility issues. Fascinating. Senator Morrison took a sip of wine. And how does a journalist who exposes the elite now see herself becoming part of them? The question was a trap, and everyone at the table knew it. I don't see myself becoming part of them, Lucy replied, keeping her tone polite but firm. I see myself beside someone who, despite being born into this world, understands the importance of using privilege to create real change. Parker inspires me because he doesn't run from uncomfortable truths. He faces them. Parker squeezed her hand, and Lucy caught the gleam of pride in his eyes. Well said, Mr. Hartford commented, raising his glass. It's rare to find someone who doesn't let themselves be seduced by the glitter of money. Or someone who knows exactly how to use it, Ethan added from the other side of the table, his tone ambiguous enough to sound like either compliment or insult. Dinner progressed in waves of careful conversation. Politics, business, social gossip disguised as genuine concern. Lucy navigated each topic with journalistic precision, answering questions, asking her own, never revealing more than necessary. But it was exhausting. Like walking a tightrope over an abyss, knowing one misstep could cost everything. "Parker?" Mrs. Sullivan leaned forward, the diamonds on her neck reflecting candlelight. "Your mother told us you and Lucy have known each other longer than was publicly disclosed. A secret love story, how romantic." Lucy felt all eyes converge on them. "It wasn't exactly secret," Parker replied, his voice calm. "It was private. There's a difference." "And what would that difference be?" the senator's husband asked, genuinely curious. Parker looked at Lucy and something passed between them. A silent communication that transcended words. "Secret implies shame," he finally said, still holding her gaze. "Private means precious. Something you keep just for yourself because you don't want the world to distort it before it has a chance to fully bloom." Lucy felt her heart race. It wasn't performance. It was raw truth, exposed before judgmental strangers. "And has it bloomed?" Margaret asked, her voice softer than Lucy had ever heard. "It's blooming," Lucy replied, finally looking away from Parker to face the matriarch. "More each day." There was a silence, not uncomfortable but heavy with meaning. Then Senator Morrison smiled, small but genuine. "Well, I for one believe it." The rest of dinner flowed more easily. Questions continued but lost their sharp edge. Genuine laughter echoed between silver cutlery and clinking crystal. Lucy told stories of investigative pieces that made even Margaret laugh. A short laugh, but real. Parker shared plans for new philanthropic projects, with Lucy adding ideas, the two completing each other's sentences so naturally that no one could doubt. When dessert was served, Sicilian lemon tart with perfect meringue, Lucy finally allowed herself to relax. Maybe they'd passed the test. Maybe the jury was being favorable. That's when Bradshaw stood up. "If you'll permit me," he said, adjusting his glasses, "I'd like to present my final conclusions about the investigation I conducted." The air in the room instantly changed. Lucy felt her stomach drop. "Mr. Bradshaw," Margaret said, but there was hesitation in her voice now. "Perhaps this isn't the time." "On the contrary, Mrs. Whitmore, I think it's exactly the time." He opened a briefcase that had been on the floor beside his chair. "After extensive analysis, conversations with multiple sources and review of documentary evidence, I've reached a definitive conclusion about the nature of the relationship between Parker Whitmore and Lucy Monroe." Lucy squeezed Parker's hand, bracing for the worst. Bradshaw looked directly at Margaret. "My investigation confirms that the relationship is genuine, completely, indisputably genuine." Silence. The evidence of prior contact, the visits to the same establishments, the transfers, the emails, don't indicate an elaborate scheme, but rather a genuinely infatuated man who didn't know how to approach the woman he admired. Bradshaw passed documents to Margaret. Furthermore, interviews with staff at Mr. Whitmore's residence reveal behavior consistent with a real relationship. Discussions about trivial domestic matters, moments of genuine intimacy observed when they thought they were alone, and most importantly, emotional vulnerability that would be impossible to consistently fake. He closed the briefcase, his gaze sweeping the table. "In my 25-year career investigating relationships for high-net-worth families, I can state with confidence, what Parker and Lucy have cannot be bought, planned, or faked. It's real, and it's rare." Lucy felt tears stinging, but refused to let them fall. Not yet. Not while everyone was watching. Margaret picked up the documents, her eyes scanning each page. When she finally looked up, there was something different in her expression. Not exactly warmth, but acceptance. Respect, perhaps. "Well," she finally said, setting down the papers, "it seems I was wrong." She looked at Parker, then at Lucy. Something that doesn't happen often, I should add. Ethan let out a disbelieving laugh. "So that's it? Approved?" "More than approved," Senator Morrison said, raising her glass. "Blessed, I'd say. It's rare to find the kind of connection these two have." Glasses rose around the table, toasts were made, and Lucy finally allowed herself to breathe. But when guests began dispersing to the living room for digestives and cigars, Parker pulled Lucy into the empty hallway. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice urgent. "What?" He hesitated, as if the words were too heavy to say. "When Bradshaw said I met you months before, Lucy, it wasn't months, it was longer. Much longer." She stared at him, her heart racing. "Parker, I met you almost 2 years ago. At Strand, yes. But before that, I read an article of yours. About corporate corruption. Powerful people getting away with crimes because they could pay for silence. And something about that, about you, changed something in me." He took her hands. "Since then, I followed you. Your work, your integrity, the way you never gave up even when they knocked you down. And when I finally saw you in person at that bookstore, you fell in love." Lucy whispered. "I was already in love," he corrected. "I just didn't know it until I saw your face." Lucy felt the world narrow until only the two of them existed, her and Parker, truths finally exposed, pretenses finally stripped away. "You're crazy," she said, but smiled. "Completely." He touched her face, his thumb tracing her cheek. "About you." And there, in the silent hallway while New York's elite toasted in the next room, Lucy finally understood. There was no more performance, no more agreement. There was only truth. Raw, imperfect, frightening, and absolutely real. Night had fallen heavy over the Hamptons, bringing with it the scent of sea breeze and jasmine from the gardens. The guests had departed, leaving behind only the echo of conversations and the phantom clinking of glasses. Margaret had retired to her quarters, and Ethan had disappeared, probably still digesting the defeat of seeing his trap turn into validation. Lucy was alone in the library, curled up in a leather armchair near the unlit fireplace, still wearing the navy blue dress that now felt like armor she no longer needed. In her hands, a book she wasn't reading. Her mind spun, processing everything that had happened that night, those weeks, since that damn kiss at the gala that changed everything. 2 years. He'd been watching her for 2 years. It should be scary, invasive, wrong. But when she closed her eyes, all she could feel was the way he'd looked at her during dinner, as if she were the only real person in a room full of masks. As if, after so long watching from afar, finally having permission to be close was a gift he still didn't believe he deserved. "I knew you'd be here." Parker's voice came from the doorway. She didn't turn, but felt when he entered, closing the door behind him with a soft click. He'd traded the tuxedo for jeans and a simple t-shirt, the first time she'd seen him truly casual since they'd arrived. "How did you know?" she asked, still looking at the unread pages. "Because it's where I'd be," he approached, sitting on the arm of the opposite chair. "When everything gets too noisy out there, you look for books." Silence. Words from people who are no longer here to judge. Lucy finally looked at him. "You've been watching me for 2 years. Of course you know where I hide." There was no accusation in her voice, just observation. But Parker flinched as if he'd been struck. "Lucy," he slid from the chair, kneeling on the floor beside her. "I know how this sounds. I know how it looks. And if you want to leave, end this now, I'll understand. I'll sign any papers, give any public explanation. Just, please don't hate me." She set down the book, turning completely to face him. There, kneeling on the library floor, Parker Whitmore didn't look like a billionaire. Didn't look like the heir to an empire. He just looked like a man afraid of losing something precious he never really had. "I don't hate you," Lucy said softly. "No? I should. Probably. But I can't." She reached out, touching his face. "Tell me. Everything. From the beginning. Not the edited version you gave in the hallway. The whole truth." Parker closed his eyes, leaning into her touch as if it were a blessing he didn't deserve. Then, taking a deep breath, he began. "I'd just left a meeting. One of those endless ones full of old men discussing figures that meant nothing beyond power. I was tired, empty, questioning why the hell I kept doing it." He opened his eyes. "I went into a cafe to buy something strong enough to keep me awake for the next meeting, and I saw a newspaper on the counter. Your story was on the front page." Lucy remembered that story. 3 months of investigation into a bribery scheme at a construction company that resulted in unsafe buildings. 5 people had died when one of them collapsed. She'd exposed everything: the executives, the politicians, the dirty money changing hands while families lost loved ones. I read every word, Parker continued. Standing in that cafe, coffee cooling in my hand, I read it all. And when I finished, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Shame. Because you were fighting to expose people like me, people who hide behind fortunes and last names while the world burns. You're not like them, Lucy protested. Aren't I? He gave a bitter laugh. I was in that cafe wearing a suit that cost more than someone's monthly salary, on my way to a meeting to discuss how to make more money than we could ever spend, while you were risking everything to give voice to those who had none. Parker, I looked for more of your stories. Read them all, every word, every comma, and I realized you weren't just writing news, you were rewriting rules, challenging systems, being the person I should have been from the start. He took her hand, intertwining their fingers. So I started following your career, discreetly, from a distance, and one day, almost 2 years after that first article, I saw you. At Strand. Real. Not just words on a page, but a flesh and blood person. Lucy vaguely remembered that day. She was looking for a specific book, something about journalistic ethics. Someone had helped her reach it. A tall, handsome man who smiled and disappeared before she could thank him properly. It was me, Parker confirmed, reading the understanding in her eyes. And in that second, when you smiled at me, a genuine smile, not knowing who I was or how much money I had, I decided I wanted to know the woman behind the words, but not as Parker Whitmore, billionaire. As just Parker. So you followed me. Not follow. Never invade. He squeezed her hand. But yes, I went back to that bookstore, waiting. And when you showed up, I'd stay there, pretending to read, just to be in the same space. I went to the cafe you frequented, the library, always keeping my distance, never approaching. Because I was afraid. Afraid of what? That if I talked to you, if I revealed myself, you'd see me like everyone else sees me. The last name. The money. The armor I can't take off. He touched her face, his thumb tracing her jaw. And I couldn't bear the idea of you looking at me with the same contempt I saw in your articles about men like me. Lucy felt something break and rearrange in her chest. The money transfers. You created that fund to cover expenses for investigative stories when your paper cut the budget. I read about it on a small blog, something you probably don't even remember writing. And I thought, this is my chance to help without her knowing. Small amounts, irregular, from an anonymous account. Just enough so you could keep doing the work that mattered. And the emails to my editor, recommendations, because you deserved those cover stories, those big opportunities, and your editor was sidelining you because you didn't have the right connections. Parker smiled sadly. Ironic, isn't it? I became the connection that helped you expose people like me. Lucy didn't know whether to laugh or cry, so she did both. A wet laugh, tears finally escaping. You're impossible, she said. I know. This is the craziest thing I've ever heard. I know. And completely, absurdly wrong. I know. And I understand if you... Romantic. The words came out before she could stop them. In a twisted, stalkerish, probably need therapy kind of way. But romantic. Parker froze. What? Lucy leaned forward, their faces so close she could feel his breath. You spent 2 years admiring me from afar, helping without asking for anything in return, waiting. And when you finally had your chance, at that gala, on that balcony, you didn't throw around charm or money. You defended me, kissed me like I was the only real thing in a world of fakeness. You were, he whispered. You are. I can't pretend anymore, Parker. Tears fell freely now. I can't pretend this is just an agreement, that we're just performing. Because when you look at me, I feel truly seen. Not the journalist, not the woman who needs to prove something, just me. Lucy. He pressed his forehead to hers, eyes closed. I tried so hard not to fall deeper in love. Because you deserve someone better. Someone who didn't spend 2 years watching you like a complete idiot. Someone who doesn't come with all the baggage of being a Whitmore. Too late, she whispered. What? To not fall deeper in love. Because I fell too. She held his face with both hands, forcing him to open his eyes. I fell for the man who leaves coffee ready in the morning, who memorizes how I take my coffee, who defends me even when his entire family is against it, who spent 2 years admiring me without asking for anything in return. I fell for you, Parker. Not for the billionaire, not for the Whitmore. For you. The silence that followed was charged with everything that didn't need to be said. Then Parker closed the remaining distance, capturing her lips in a kiss that wasn't for cameras, wasn't for performance, wasn't to convince anyone. It was just for them. And for the first time since everything began, there were no lies between them, no masks. Just raw, exposed, vulnerable truth. And absolutely, irrevocably real. The kiss began softly, a delicate question being asked by lips that no longer needed answers, but sought them anyway. Parker held Lucy's face as if she were made of something precious and fragile, his thumbs tracing her cheekbones while tasting the salty flavor of tears still falling. But Lucy didn't feel fragile. For the first time in years, she felt whole. She deepened the kiss, hands sliding to the nape of his neck, fingers tangling in his dark hair. Parker responded with a low sound in his throat, half sigh, half surrender, and pulled her closer, eliminating any space that still existed between them. It wasn't the gala kiss, rushed and desperate before judgmental cameras. It wasn't performance. It was confession. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Parker rested his forehead against hers, eyes still closed as if memorizing that moment. Lucy, he whispered, his voice hoarse. I need you to understand something. What? He opened his eyes, and there was something there she'd never seen before. Total vulnerability, unfiltered, unprotected. I can't pretend anymore. I can't wake up in that penthouse and pretend that seeing you in the morning is just part of an agreement. I can't pretend that every time you laugh, I don't feel like the whole world makes sense. I can't. His voice failed. I can't pretend I don't love you. Because I do. Completely. Desperately. In a way that scares me and completes me at the same time. The words fell between them like stones thrown into still water, creating waves that couldn't be taken back. Lucy felt her heart race, her breath catch, the entire world narrow until only he existed. This impossible, complicated man who'd spent 2 years loving her from afar, and now loved her up close with the same intensity. Parker, she tried to find the right words, but there were no right words for a moment like this. You don't have to say anything, he rushed. You don't have to feel the same. I know this is too intense, too fast, too complicated. I just needed you to know. I needed to stop lying, especially to myself. Let me talk, Lucy interrupted softly. He closed his mouth, waiting, and she saw the fear in his eyes. Fear of rejection, of having revealed too much, of having ruined whatever they still had. Lucy took his hands, intertwining their fingers. When I was 17, she began, her voice low but steady. My literature teacher said there are 2 types of love. The love that consumes you, that burns fast and intense like a wildfire, and the love that builds you, that grows slowly like a tree, creating deep roots. Parker listened in silence, eyes fixed on her. I always thought I had to choose between the 2. That intense love couldn't have depth. That love with roots couldn't have passion. She squeezed his hands. But then you showed up. With your 2 years of silent observation and your impulsive kiss at a gala. With your memorized coffee and your vulnerable confessions. And I realized, I don't have to choose. Because you're both. Lucy. You consume me, Parker. Every thought, every breath, every heartbeat since that night. And at the same time, you're creating roots in me so deep I'm afraid I'll never be able to pull you out. She smiled through tears. And the scariest part? I don't want to. I don't want to pull you out. I don't want to go back to who I was before you, because who I am with you is who I've always wanted to be. Parker pulled her to him, arms wrapping around her with an urgency that spoke of months, years, of waiting. Say it again, he asked against her hair. That you consume me? No. The other part. Lucy pulled back just enough to look into his eyes. That I love you? That? He smiled. That rare, genuine smile that transformed his entire face. Say it again. I love you, Parker Whitmore. And this time, when she said it, she felt the truth reverberate in every cell of her body. I love the man who spends 2 years admiring from afar. I love the man who defends me even when it costs him. I love the man who memorizes how I take my coffee and who looks at me like I'm the only real person in a world of lies. Lucy, his voice was pure emotion, but I also hate you a little, she added, a smile playing on her lips. He blinked, surprised. What? I hate that you make me feel so much. That you entered my life like a hurricane disguised as a business deal. That you make me want things I swore I'd never want. Commitment, future, that scary word with M for marriage. Parker laughed, a deep, genuine laugh that echoed through the silent library. Sorry? He offered, not sounding the least bit apologetic. You're not. Lucy poked his chest. And neither am I. Because if 2 years ago someone told me I'd fall in love with a billionaire who watched me in bookstores, I would have laughed. If a month ago someone said I'd move into a midtown penthouse and fake an engagement that would become real, I would have called the police. And now? Now, she touched his face, thumb tracing the line of his jaw. Now I can't imagine my life without you. And that terrifies and completes me at the same time. Parker captured her hand, bringing it to his lips and kissing each knuckle, each joint, the palm, the wrist, where her pulse beat fast. I'm going to spend the rest of my life loving you, he promised against her skin. I'll wake up every day and have coffee ready. I'll defend you against my family, against the world, against anyone who tries to diminish you. I'll watch you read for hours without saying a word because seeing you happy is my favorite place in the world. Parker, the tears returned, but now they were different. They weren't from pain or confusion. They were from something dangerously close to pure happiness. And I'll give you time, he continued, now holding both her hands. All the time you need. If it takes 6 months or 6 years for you to feel ready for more, I'll wait, because you're worth every second of waiting. Lucy looked at this man, this impossible, complicated, absurdly romantic man, and made a decision. What if I don't want to wait? His eyes widened. What? What if? She took a deep breath, gathering courage. What if the agreement ends here? Not what we have, but the lie. What if we just own it? Tell the world this is real, that it always was, that it has no expiration date. Lucy, are you sure? Parker held her face. Because once we own it, there's no going back. The media will be relentless. My family will have opinions. Your work might get complicated. I don't want you to regret. She interrupted him with a kiss, firm, decided, leaving no room for doubt. I'm sure, she said when they pulled apart, because for the first time in my life, I'm not running from something complicated. I'm running toward it. Toward you. Parker closed his eyes, his expression pure gratitude, pure relief, pure joy. Then let's do this, he said. Together, real. No pretending. No pretending, she agreed. And when they kissed again, deeper, more urgent, charged with the promise of everything they were building together, they both knew there was no more agreement. There was only love. Imperfect, complicated, frightening, and absolutely irrevocably real. Outside the library, the storm that had been forming during the day finally arrived. Lightning illuminated the Hamptons' sky, thunder echoed over the ocean, and rain began to fall, torrential, purifying, washing away everything that came before. But inside that library, wrapped in each other, Lucy and Parker barely noticed. Because they were too busy creating their own storm. And unlike the previous ones, this one had no intention of passing. The storm showed no signs of letting up. Heavy raindrops hammered against the library windows, creating a hypnotic sound that isolated the outside world. Lightning tore through the dark sky, briefly illuminating the Whitmore gardens before plunging them back into darkness. But inside that library, wrapped in each other on the leather armchair that now seemed too small to contain everything they felt, Lucy and Parker existed in their own universe. We should go, Lucy murmured against his lips, even without making any move to pull away. We should, Parker agreed, his hands tracing the outline of her back over the navy blue dress. Your mother will hear if we stay here. Probably. And Ethan? Screw Ethan. Parker captured her lips again, deeper this time, and Lucy felt any rational thought dissolve. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. Come with me. It wasn't a question, but it wasn't a command either. It was an invitation, a promise, a choice. Lucy knew exactly what that invitation meant. She knew that if she got up from that chair, if she took his hand and followed him, there would be no going back. There would be no more lines to cross because they would have already crossed them all. Where? She asked, though she already knew the answer. My room. His eyes searched hers in the dimness. But only if you want to. No pressure. No expectations. We can just talk. Or sleep or... Lucy pressed her fingers against his lips, silencing him. Parker? Yes? Stop talking. She stood, extending her hand. He took it, intertwining their fingers, and together they crossed the silent library, the hallway lit only by night lights, climbing the marble staircase that led to the second floor. Parker's room was in the east wing, the farthest from Margaret's suite. Lucy noted with relief she didn't try to hide. He opened the door, letting her enter first. The storm was even more intense from there. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the raging ocean, waves crashing against the shore, white foam visible even in the darkness. Lightning illuminated the room in strobe flashes, revealing a masculine but welcoming decor. Shades of gray and navy blue, a king bed that dominated the space, shelves full of books Lucy recognized as the same ones she read. You have my favorite books, she said, touching the familiar spines. Our favorite books, Parker corrected, closing the door behind him. I read everything you mentioned in interviews, every recommendation you made on social media. I wanted to understand what shaped your mind. Lucy turned to face him. You're impossible. You already said that today. It's worth repeating. They stood there, separated by only a few steps, but the air between them was charged with electricity that had nothing to do with the storm outside. Lucy felt her heart race, not from nervousness but from anticipation, from desire that had been building since that first kiss at the gala, since every accidental touch in the penthouse, since every look that lasted a second longer than necessary. Parker took the first step, slow, deliberate, as if giving her time to change her mind at any moment. But Lucy didn't step back. She remained firm, chin raised, eyes on his. When he finally reached her, he didn't touch her immediately. He just stood there, so close she could feel the heat emanating from him, could see every shade of gray in his dark eyes, could count every breath. Lucy, he said softly, his voice hoarse. If at any point you want to stop, I know. She touched his face, thumb tracing his lower lip. But I won't want to. It was all he needed to hear. Parker pulled her to him, lips capturing hers with an urgency that stole Lucy's breath. His hands found her waist, pulling her closer, eliminating any space between them. Lucy responded with equal intensity, fingers tangling in his hair, feeling muscles tense under her touch. They moved together, an uncoordinated dance until Lucy's back touched the wall. Parker braced his hands on either side of her, surrounding but not trapping her, always leaving space for her to escape if she wanted. But she didn't want to escape. She wanted to get lost. Parker, she whispered against his lips. Touch me. Really? He groaned low, forehead pressing against hers for a second while he regained control. Then, with a reverence that made Lucy's heart tighten, he raised his hands to the first button of her dress. May I? He asked. Yes. His fingers worked the button, then another, and another. Each button released revealed more skin, and Parker followed the path with his lips, kissing every exposed inch. Her shoulder, her collarbone, the space between her breasts. Lucy let her head fall back against the wall, eyes closed, just feeling. His hands were firm, but gentle, exploring with a patience that bordered on torture. When the dress finally slid down her body and fell to the floor in a whisper of fabric, she opened her eyes and found Parker looking at her as if seeing something sacred. You're beautiful, he said, not as a casual compliment, but as a statement of undeniable fact. Lucy felt her cheeks flush but didn't look away. Instead, she reached for the hem of his shirt. Fair is fair. He raised his arms, letting her remove the piece. Lucy let her hands slide over his chest, feeling muscles contract under her touch, accelerated heartbeats under her palm. You're nervous, she realized. Terrified, he admitted, of not being good enough, of disappointing you, of... Lucy silenced him with a kiss. Impossible. They moved to the bed, a dance of tangled limbs and ragged breaths. Parker laid her on the soft sheets with a gentleness that contrasted with the urgency Lucy saw in his eyes. He hovered over her, supported on his elbows, just looking. What? She asked. Just memorizing. He traced the outline of her face with his fingertips. This moment. You. Here. With me. Real. Not a dream I've had for 2 years. Lucy felt tears sting again, but smiled through them. It's not a dream for me either. Good. He leaned in, kissing her deeply. Because I intend to make every second count. And he did. Parker explored her as if she were a mystery he had a lifetime to decipher. Every touch was intentional, every kiss, purposeful. He memorized what made her gasp, what made her arch, what pulled his name from her lips in an urgent whisper. And Lucy reciprocated. She discovered he was sensitive at the base of his neck, that his control faltered when she lightly bit his lower lip, that his name spoken in his ear made him tremble. Outside, the storm reached its peak. Thunder shook the windows, rain beat furiously. Lightning illuminated the room in bursts of white light. But inside that sanctuary, between tangled sheets and intertwined bodies, Parker and Lucy created their own storm. One of skin against skin, synchronized breaths, whispers of promises and confessions that only darkness would witness. It wasn't perfect, it was real. It was awkward at moments, nervous laughter at others. It was Parker stopping to make sure she was okay, and Lucy pulling him back with growing urgency. It was finding rhythm together, learning each other's body language, creating a dance that was only theirs. And when they finally reached the precipice, together because Parker waited for her with a patience Lucy would never forget, it was as if the entire world paused for a second. Afterward, lying under sheets that still held the warmth of their connection, Lucy rested her head on Parker's chest, listening to the steady beating of a heart that now beat for her. His fingers traced lazy patterns on her back, his other hand intertwined with hers over his chest. Lucy, he said in the darkness. Thank you. She lifted her head to look at him. For what? For giving me a chance, for seeing beyond what I show the world, for choosing me even when I didn't deserve to be chosen. Lucy touched his face, thumb tracing his lower lip. You always deserved it, Parker. You just needed someone who could see. And you see? Everything. She smiled. The good, the complicated, the impossible. And I choose all of it. I choose you. Parker pulled her closer, kissing the top of her head. Then we're two lucky idiots. Lucy laughed against his chest, the sound muffled but genuine. Outside, the storm was finally beginning to subside. The rain was now a soft melody against the windows, distant thunder echoing its farewell. But there, in that bed, wrapped in each other, Parker and Lucy knew. That night wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. And unlike the storm outside, what they had no intention of passing. It was permanent, real, and absolutely theirs. The morning light entered through the windows like a gentle promise, tinting the room in golden and rosy tones. Last night's storm had left the air clean, fresh, laden with the scent of sea breeze and wet earth. Birds sang in the gardens, celebrating the new day with a joy that seemed to echo what Lucy felt. She woke slowly, aware first of the warmth, Parker's body wrapping around hers from behind, his arms secure around her waist, his breath soft against her neck. For a moment she remained still, fearing any movement would break the perfection of that instant. I know you're awake. Parker's husky voice came in her ear, heavy with sleep and something deeper. Lucy smiled, turning in his arms to face him. His hair was messy, there were sleep marks on his face, and he was absolutely perfect. How do you know? Your breathing changed. He kissed her forehead. And you have that little smile that only appears when you're truly happy. Observant. 2 years of practice, remember? He smiled, but there was vulnerability in his eyes. Any regrets? Lucy touched his face, thumb tracing the line of his jaw. None. You? Impossible. He captured her hand, kissing her palm. Waking up with you here is the only right thing I've done in a long time. They stayed there for a few more minutes, just existing together in the soft morning light. Then Lucy remembered something. The contract. The damn contract that started all this. Parker, she said, propping herself up on her elbow to look at him better. The agreement. The 6 months. The performance. What about it? It's over, isn't it? All of this changed. We're not pretending anymore. He sat up, pulling her with him until she was sitting beside him, sheets pooling around their waists. No, we're not. So what do we do with the contract? Parker looked at her for a long moment, then a slow smile spread across his face, the kind of smile that transformed his entire face, revealing the man behind the billionaire armor. Come with me. He got out of bed, pulling on sweatpants and offering her one of his t-shirts. Lucy put it on, too big, reaching almost to her knees with his scent soaked into the fabric, and followed him out of the room. They went down to the library, the same place where everything had been revealed the night before. The fireplace was out, cold ashes from the last fire still visible. Parker went to the desk in the corner, opening the drawer and removing a thick envelope. The contract. Lucy recognized it immediately. The pages he'd shown her that morning in Brooklyn, detailing every term of the 6-month agreement. No romantic involvement, just convincing performance. Expiration date clearly marked. What are you going to do? She asked. Parker didn't answer with words. Instead, he walked to the fireplace, knelt down, and began preparing new wood. Lucy watched him, the efficient movements, the way his hands worked, the concentration on his face. When the fire finally caught, small flames licking the wood and growing in intensity, Parker turned to her, extending the contract. You should do this, he said. Lucy took the envelope, feeling the weight, not of the paper but of what it represented. All the pretending, all the lies, all the protection that kept them safe but separate. Are you sure? She asked. Absolutely, he approached, standing beside her. Because this was never about the contract. It was about finding the courage to admit what was already true. Lucy looked at the dancing flames, then at the envelope in her hands. She took a deep breath and then, without hesitating, threw the contract into the fire. The paper caught immediately. Orange and yellow flames consumed the pages, turning words into ashes, transforming legal terms into smoke that rose up the chimney and disappeared into the morning sky. They watched in silence until nothing remained but pulsing red embers. Done, Lucy finally said. No agreement, no expiration date, no pretending. Just us, Parker completed, pulling her to him. Just us. They kissed there, bathed in the light of the fire in the morning, sealing something that no longer needed papers or official witnesses. It was theirs. Real. Permanent. The sound of footsteps in the hallway separated them. Margaret appeared in the library entrance, already impeccably dressed despite the early hour, her eyes scanning the scene. The fire, the still visible ashes, Lucy wearing Parker's t-shirt, the two of them barefoot and visibly coming from the same room. Good morning, she said, her tone neutral but her eyes revealing that she understood perfectly what she'd witnessed. Mother, Parker began. But Margaret raised her hand. Don't. She entered the library, stopping in front of the fireplace and looking at the contract's ashes. You don't need to explain. No. Margaret turned to face them, and for the first time since Lucy had met her, there was something close to warmth in her eyes. I didn't get where I am by being blind, Parker. I saw it last night. The way you look at each other. How you complete each other's sentences. How your bodies naturally lean toward each other even when you're not conscious of it. She paused. That can't be faked. Believe me, I tried for years with your father. Lucy felt Parker tense beside her at the mention of his father, a subject he rarely touched. So you approve? He asked, his voice careful. Approval would be presumptuous of me. Margaret smiled slightly, a small smile but genuine. But I recognize when I'm wrong, and I was wrong about Lucy. She's not an opportunist. She's exactly what you need. Someone who challenges you, who sees you, who isn't intimidated by the Whitmore name. Lucy felt something release in her chest. Not that she needed Margaret's approval, but having it made everything easier. Thank you, Lucy said. Don't thank me yet. Margaret crossed her arms. Because now that you've burned the contract, literally, comes the hard part. The real world, the media, business, balancing two demanding careers with a relationship that will be constantly scrutinized. We're ready, Parker said, holding Lucy's hand. Are you? Margaret studied them. Because it won't be easy. There will be people who question your motives, Lucy. Who will say you're with him for the money, for the position. And there will be people who question you, Parker. Who will say she distracts you, weakens you. Let them talk, Lucy said, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. Because I know the truth. I know who he is when the cameras turn off. I know how he makes me want to be better. And that's worth any headline, any gossip, any judgment. Margaret looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. Good, because Whitmores don't back down from battles. We win them. Lucy isn't a Whitmore, Parker pointed out. Not yet, Margaret replied, and there was something close to affection in her voice now. But I have a feeling that's just a matter of time. She turned to leave, but stopped at the door. Oh, and Parker? Ethan already left. He left a message saying he was reassessing his priorities. I think your little performance last night finally convinced him you're stronger than he imagined. When Margaret left, Lucy let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Did that really happen? She asked. Your mother basically gave us her blessing? And mentioned marriage? Parker added, his eyes dancing with amusement. Subtle as always. Very subtle. Lucy laughed, then grew serious. Parker, she's right. About the hard part. About the real world. This isn't going to be easy. I know. He pulled her closer, wrapping her in his arms. But you know what I learned in the last 2 years watching you? What? That you don't run from difficult things. You face them head on with that stubborn, brilliant way of yours. So if this is going to be hard, he kissed her forehead, we'll face it together, like everything else. Lucy buried her face in his chest, listening to the steady beating of his heart. Together. They stayed like that for long minutes, just holding each other in the library where everything had begun to be revealed. Outside, the day continued to brighten, the sun rising over the Hamptons, bathing the gardens in golden light. It was a new beginning. Not perfect, because life is never perfect, but it was real. It was theirs. And as Lucy looked at the ashes in the fireplace, the last remnants of the contract that brought them together but never defined them, she knew with absolute certainty. Sometimes the best stories begin with a lie, but the true ones, the ones that last, those begin the moment you stop pretending and finally allow yourself to feel. And feeling, Lucy discovered in Parker's arms as the sun rose over a new day, was the most frightening and most liberating thing she'd ever done. But it was also the only thing that mattered. Because in the end, love wasn't about contracts or agreements or convincing performances. It was about choosing someone, every day, again and again. And Lucy chose Parker. Today, tomorrow, and every day that came after. Sometimes life surprises us in the most unlikely places. Lucy walked into that gala expecting only to fulfill a professional obligation. She left with a public scandal and an agreement that seemed like madness. But what she didn't expect, what neither of them expected, was discovering that true love doesn't ask for permission, doesn't follow schedules, doesn't respect contracts. It simply happens, even when we try to resist. Parker spent 2 years admiring from afar, afraid of not being enough. Lucy spent her life building walls, protecting herself from vulnerability. And then, in 6 months, that changed everything. They discovered that the greatest courage isn't avoiding fear, it's choosing to love despite it. Because in the end, it doesn't matter how the story begins. What matters is whether you had the courage to let it be real. And you? When was the last time you had the courage to feel something real? If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and tell me in the comments, where are you listening from? I love knowing these stories travel to places I can't even imagine. You know when you feel like you're living everyone else's life except your own? That you got lost somewhere between being what others expect and who you really are? I've felt that too, and I discovered that sometimes we need to stop, look in the mirror, and ask, when did I stop choosing myself? I've pinned something in the comments that might resonate with you today. It's not for everyone. Only for those who still believe there's a truer version of themselves waiting to be lived. The question is, are you ready to find her?